Hi everybody, welcome to week 10 for EDUC2065, Professionalism, Leadership and Management in Early Childhood. On the agenda for today's lecture, just some final slides about Assessment 3 and the role of the educational leader. If you have any questions or last minute queries about Assessment 3, please make sure you've got my correct email and you're asking them well before the due date. Then we're going to move on to the main section of today's lecture, which is all about nurturing relationships with children by building shared understandings with families and partnering with parents, and just our attitudes around parents as early childhood educators. And we're also going to be having a little bit of a look at some immunisation legislation. Okay, so as we all know by now, we have explored the role of the pedagogical or educational leader in previous tutorials and lectures, and you're currently preparing an essay on this topic and have interviewed somebody that you can interview who fulfills this role. Just a reminder that the reason why this person exists is because Regulation 118 of the Education and Care Service National Regulations states the approved provider of an education and care service must designate in writing a suitably qualified and experienced educator, coordinator, or other individual as educational leader at the service to lead the development and implementation of educational programs in the service. So that means that we need to have somebody in place who's guiding other educators in all of their planning, in all of their reflections on learning and how the children are progressing, and who's able to mentor colleagues in their implementation practices. Under the regulations, the approved service provider is required to appoint an educational leader so that it makes sense because that person has acquired the greatest knowledge of education theories and research. So the person who has done the most study or who has the most experience of educational theories or exposure to different ways that children learn. This person should have a very deep knowledge of curriculum approaches and the strengths and weaknesses of each approach, because no one approach is a golden ticket to learning for every single child. Different children sometimes need different approaches. This person should also have a deep knowledge of learning styles to meet the needs of individual children with varying abilities. So it means that we don't just require a basic or sound understanding of the EYLF. We need to have an understanding of how each of the principles and practices within the EYLF contribute to a high quality learning experience. One of the essential obligations of an educational leader is to collaborate with other educators, and they should be providing curriculum direction and guidance. The steps and processes to meet this obligation might include meeting with educators on a fortnightly or monthly basis to discuss curriculum and provide curriculum support materials, perhaps exploring concepts of the EYLF, etc. The ASEQA Educational Leadership website and the Early Learning resource can provide much more information about this role. So a lot of this information can be found on the ASEQA website, and it is a primary source of information for helping define the role of the educational leader, which is part of what's expected for Assessment 3. All right, I know you've seen these two slides before, but it's worth reminding you as you are drafting your assignments, because we don't want to conflate the role of educational or pedagogical leader with that of the person who is often the manager or director of a centre who has important but different responsibilities. So if you find yourself, or if in your interview, or if you find yourself in your essay starting to write about things that are ensuring compliance for the laws and regulations outside of the one that's about the educational leader, making sure everyone's aware of OC health and safety policies and procedures, or staff ratios and duty of care requirements, making sure everyone's got relevant qualifications or first aid training. These are managerial responsibilities, and they are distinct from that of a curriculum or educational leader. Other important but managerial responsibilities include the person who's in charge of rostering or making sure that adequate staffing and supervision is in place, recording children's rest times, their eating habits, any illnesses that occur, medications, sleep and wake cycles, set up and pack up of the physical environment, although they do sometimes help with these things, and just the general day-to-day operation of the centre. all of which are essential to the effective operation of a centre, but it's not what this particular assessment is about. This one is very much about that curriculum leadership and about learning and young children progressing through certain learning cycles. So, refocusing now back again on what the pedagogical leader is actually tasked with. So, one of the key responsibilities of a pedagogical leader is to support other team members with various skills and knowledge that they're going to use as part of the team to support the learning of the children under their care. Now, that does not necessarily mean that all team members are going to share these tasks equally. And some of the reasons may be you may have different levels of experience or qualification across staff. So those with greater experience or with greater qualifications may be tasked with additional responsibilities. And so that may manifest in an unequal way. So it's not just 4 people divide the work into 4 quarters sort of deal. It's very much reflective of the strengths of the staff within your centre. The educational leader is also tasked with helping other people to reflect on their practice. What's going well? What are we really doing well? What can we celebrate here and maximise and do more of? And perhaps what changes might need to be made so that we can target areas for improvement. And this type of reflection cycle is a focus for when we are looked at for assessment and rating process, but it should be a continuous process. So that's a really good one to add to your interview if you haven't already, or ask the person who you are accessing, who is the educational leader, how do they reflect? What's that process like for them? The Early Years Learning Framework identifies that critical reflection and ongoing professional learning is one of the 8 principles that underpins effective early childhood pedagogy. So the EYLF backs up that process of reflection. In other words, if we are not reflecting on the things that we are doing, we're missing opportunities to acknowledge our successes and target our areas for improvement. Vygotsky's theory of social constructivism also supports this. And one of the ways that this social constructivist theory does support this is because we're able to observe the practices of our co-workers, and because we're able to ask questions in this reflection process, we end up increasing our skills and knowledge in many areas. Social learning can take place when a group of people share a common goal, and we sort of scaffold each other through that process. When you are an educational leader, that professional reflection and that change management process takes a lot of leadership. You need to bring a lot of leadership skills to that process. The educational leader will involve prompting colleagues to read the EYLF or portions of the EYLF, help them to interpret what it means, what is it saying in the EYLF, encourage professional conversations about our practice, and ensure that everybody involved in the decisions and changes has a say for anything that's going to affect them. Leaders support and guide colleagues through processes of inquiry and reflection. And if we are presenting ourselves as non-threatening, and if people feel comfortable with us, they're going to be ready to share their work, talk about the things that they need help with, and they'll gradually become more willing to try new strategies and reflect on how they went. People won't do this if they do not feel psychologically safe. So we need to create psychologically safe environments as educational leaders to enable people to sort of give us that vulnerability of saying, you know what, I just don't know if I'm doing this part well, or I thought I was doing this well, I planned it this way, but this is what happened and I just need help here. So for people to feel comfortable to have those types of conversations, which is such an opportunity for growth, we have to create a safe environment for those conversations to happen. The goal, of course, is that the person who's being taught will end up becoming more skilled, or they might know more, and that they'll then be able to use that knowledge for themselves. So that classic adage, when we know better, we do better. So let's have a little look now at what the EYLF says about reflection and about how we support our team members as educational leaders. Principle 7 talks about critical reflection and ongoing professional learning. Are we achieving or have we achieved our goals? How do we know that we've achieved them? What went well? What hampered us? These types of reflective practice questions involve engaging with these types of questions, gathering information, critically examining what's happening and reflecting on what might be changed. So it's not complaining about things that aren't working, it's about reflecting on the efforts that's gone into a particular process or cycle or opportunity, and having a think and a conversation and gathering information and saying, okay, this was the intent, this was the outcome, where can we make some adjustments or improvements? Educators are required to design and develop learning and teaching programs that suit the needs of children. They must ensure that the programs include learning opportunities and enriching experiences for their children aimed at achieving the desired outcomes. And early childhood educators are amazing at this. The best way of developing a curriculum that meets the needs of the whole school community is to provide opportunities for teachers to work together at common times. In other words, if you're in an approved care service, it can be really difficult to make time for staff to sit down and actually talk about these things, because you've got to have a couple of people usually doing it off the floor, so that they can actually concentrate on the task that they're doing. So it is an investment. It's an investment in time, it's an investment in staffing, but ultimately it's an investment in children's development and learning. Principle 8 talks about collaborative leadership and teamwork. And because the EYLF says it's a view of leadership that empowers all members of the team to use their professional knowledge and skills in ways that assist everyone to do the best that they can for children, for families and colleagues in their setting. So that notion of collaboration, that notion of no one person can do it all, and that notion of together we're better, needs to be felt and needs to be encouraged and facilitated by the educational leader of a service. All right, so just a moment if you choose to pause and just kind of digest all that information that's come at you rather quickly. Last week in the tutorials, we covered a few things. We were very busy, but there is also a reading that we may have missed that it's really worthwhile having a look at, which I'll talk about in coming lectures as well, called the Code of Ethics, the Early Childhood Australia Code of Ethics. It actually talks about, it's just a brochure, okay, so it's very, very short to read. It's very clear. It talks about having respect for different viewpoints, having opportunities for everybody to contribute, and how we proactively share the load. How do we share workload? Many people will be familiar with the old sort of cliche, there's no I in team, and that kind of reminds us all of the importance of working together, of sharing responsibilities, and maintaining a balance of different roles within any given team. But despite this, every team does in fact begin with I, the individuals, because we all come together as individuals to form teams. And without all of these individuals, the team can't exist. So a couple of questions for you to ponder. Does this mean that all team members are going to share all tasks equally? Why or why not? And what are the ramifications of that? And is it fair to expect unqualified staff to plan for the developmental needs of children? Is that fair? Why or why not? Have a little reflect yourself on those things. If you can bring your opinions to the tutorials, that will help with our discussions. Okay, the lecture is going to shift now and talk a lot more about relationships and the types of perspective that we want and need professional early childhood educators to exhibit. As early childhood educators, relationships are very much at the heart of everything that we do. The quality of a child's early relationships play a significant role in their physical, social, emotional, and intellectual development. The development of the whole child is closely linked to the quality of relationships that they experience with others. Their brain pathways that develop, that affect literacy and behaviour and health, form very early. All early experiences contribute to brain structure and brain capacity. The quality, the quantity, and consistency of stimulation, both cognitive and emotional, will affect the number of synapses that are formed and how those brain connections will function. So we must ensure that we're having genuine and positive relationships with children and families and with each other if we want to achieve these positive outcomes. Staff and families share the common goal of positive outcomes for children. We're all in this for positive reasons. We all care about these little people. The relationship between the child's family and the staff is crucial to the child's well-being, development, and progress. I invite you now to press pause, even though I haven't got my black pause button on this slide, but I feel like you know what to do. And just jot down a couple of dot points answering the question, why are positive relationships so important when we work with young children? All of you know this, but why is it? What are the actual tangible reasons that it is important this happens? So hit pause now, just dot point as many as you can and press play when you are ready. Okay, hello, welcome back. So some of the reasons that we must strike that positive relationship, we've got to get that balance right when we are interacting with young children, is because responsive and trusting relationships between the child and the educator provide a foundation. And that foundation allows children to learn and develop social and emotional skills. So they need to have established that relationship before any learning can be placed on top of that. All right. Educators are able to help children deal effectively with a variety of their feelings and behaviours, and many of you will be experiencing this in real time on your pracs. When service policies and practices reflect and model respectful relationships, the social and emotional well-being of the whole service community, the kids, the families, the educators, staff, the directors, is all supported. A warm bond with parents and other caregivers is so important for security and happiness. And it also has a positive impact on physical brain development. So there's science behind these positive relationships. The connection to later emotional well-being of having a secure attachment between each baby and a warm, stable adult cannot be underestimated. Sensitive and responsive care acts as a buffer for the activation of our stress system, and caregivers and centres are directly related to the activity of that developing stress system. Babies who are securely attached are less likely to produce cortisol under stressful conditions, and when they do, the levels of this hormone are much lower than in children who have not got secure attachments. So warm, responsive care has a protective biological function, and this helps children cope with ordinary stresses and is consistent support among these strong attachments, which in turn supports brain development. Some of you may have already studied a child development unit which talks about, or you may have heard of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this talks about 7 levels of needs and the impact of those needs on our motivation. So besides our physical needs like shelter and food and warmth, etc., humans also have psychological needs. And these include affection, consistency, security, trust, quality interactions, appropriate expectations, acceptance, and positive attitudes to our unique characteristics. It's important to remember that even though sometimes these are deemed lower level needs that are essential for survival and safety, they need to be met first before learning or anything else can occur. So Greenman says care, learning, and relationships altogether are the curriculum. This is true for all programs and schools for all children. Understanding that as children age, the care needs will change. Some care needs will diminish, some new ones will arise, but that need for care never disappears. The quality of relationship that we make with children, the way we support their relationships with their peers and their partnerships that we develop with their families are crucial. Okay, so how do we identify these types of attachments? How do we know if we have developed these positive relationships and partnerships with children? A couple of questions that you can ask yourself, and again, feel free to hit pause and jot down your thoughts. What sorts of things would you observe that tell you that an infant or a toddler, so perhaps a child who is nonverbal, has a secure attachment with you? What would be the clues? What would be the things that you could observe that speak to this child having a positive and secure relationship with you, a care worker? How would feeling secure help this infant or toddler to be able to pay attention and learn? Have a think about both of those questions, and then you know what to do. As we're thinking and learning about these positive relationships and partnerships with the children that we are caring for, something to keep in mind is that Porter summarizes 10 things that an infant needs in order to help the brain grow. And here's a sentence that contains them all for ease of remembering. When I touch and interact with infants and communicate with them in a safe and healthy environment, I provide high quality care, I build stable relationships, we play, read, and listen to music as I watch their self-esteem soar. This sentence contains many things that infants need. If you look closely in this sentence, we can see interaction, there is touch, there's a stable relationship present, a safe and healthy environment, self-esteem, quality care, good communication, play, music, and reading. And these are the things that we need to offer all children. Okay, we're going to shift our focus slightly now and move on from the positive relationship between educator and child. And we sometimes think relationship is usually about that particular relationship between educator and child. But one of the most critical relationships that ensures we are providing a high quality level of care is the relationship and partnership that we build with the families, which is just as important. Effective relationships between educators and families are fundamental to the quality of education and care that children can receive. Working with parents is rewarding and it is challenging, and it's always full of possibilities. The significance of families in children's lives and in their learning, development and well-being is well recognised throughout the EYLF, and we'll see that word partnerships with families is highlighted throughout as one of those 8 key principles that underpins effective practice. The National Quality Framework has an explicit requirement for services to work in partnership with families, and we'll learn more about that when we have our presentations on that particular quality area. The EYLF raises the bar for educators by requiring a rich and complex relationship with families. The EYLF asks educators to go beyond just involving families in the operation of the service and reporting to them on their child's learning, to actual collaboration with them to support children's learning. In other words, the EYLF describes educators as working in partnership and collaboration with children and families to negotiate the child's experience. Okay, a question for you, a prompt. Pause when you're ready and jot down why effective partnerships with families are so important in early childhood education and care. Hit pause, see if you can get a minimum of 10. I'm sure you'll have many, many more ideas, but why is it so important that we have really well-functioning partnerships with the families of the children for whom we care? Okay, hello, welcome back. Thank you for doing that. Some of the things that you may have included might be very specific. I'm going to answer them in a more broad term. One of the reasons that we need to have effective partnerships with families is because children don't exist in isolation. They're not just children who are without a family. They come from some sort of context. The parents and other family members are a child's first and most important teachers. We are never going to overtake that role, and that is not our place. Families are the primary influence in their children's lives, and they also have strong beliefs and values regarding the education and care of their children and the experiences in which their children should be able to participate. And sometimes this can be exciting, sometimes this can be challenging, and sometimes it can be a cause of conflict, or it can be something that is to be celebrated. This is a nuanced relationship. The family is central to children's mental health. By working together with parents and carers, ECEC services can make a substantial difference to the mental health of children. Researchers have identified a range of family-related risk and protective factors that influence children's mental health. Partnerships between families and educators are a protective factor for children's mental health because each party feels more comfortable about approaching the other party for information and support. For an educator, this partnership can facilitate a better understanding of a family's parenting style, of their values, of their beliefs. And for families, it can promote feelings of being respected and welcomed by an ECEC service. Parents and carers will be much more likely to access available support and education if they've got a mutual and collaborative relationship with educators at the service. A sense of belonging and welcome is essential if families are to feel comfortable being in our services, let alone feeling that they can contribute to what we do. Children ultimately benefit most when this is a trusting and mutually supportive partnership. One of the phrases I would often say to parents when we would have meetings to discuss their child for whatever issue that came up is very much that, look, we're all on the same team. We're all on team child, and we're just approaching it from different places, and we all bring something to that particular relationship. As educators, we know that children learn how to act by watching how family members respond. If families feel happy and welcome, then children will too. When families trust their child into our care, they want to know, first of all, are we caring and trustworthy? Are their children going to be okay while they're with us? When we talk to families, it's important that we move beyond just the daily greetings and the daily farewells, and we start to build a deeper connection and understanding and get to know them. This is our chance to show families that we know their child and we know what we're doing. When we take the time to have deeper conversations about children's interests and their learning, it gives families an insight into their own child's day, as well as the importance of our role as educators. There's lots of answers that are stated clearly throughout the EYLF. Statements like, families are children's first and most influential educators, on page 5. From birth, children are connected to family, community, culture and place, page 7. The diversity in family life means that children experience belonging, being and becoming in many different ways, page 9. Children thrive when families and educators work together in partnership to support young children's learning, also page 9. And learning outcomes are most likely to be achieved when early childhood educators work in partnership with families, page 12. So having a variety of ways for families to become involved is essential, and it can contribute to an effective partnership. One of the things that we often have to discuss with parents very early on can be some early intervention strategies or early intervention agencies. We cannot afford to postpone investing in children until they become adults, and nor can we wait until they reach school. This can be a time when it may be too late to intervene. Early childhood education and care service policies and practices are in place to support educators and families to work together to facilitate families' access to parenting resources. ECEC services, through regular contact with families, provide an ideal access point for families to learn more about what parenting can involve and sometimes the difficulties and challenges of being a parent. We also can point them in the direction of information about child development, what's sort of within the classic normal range, what's okay, what might take time, what's different for all children, and how to support children's mental health. The best outcomes for children occur when educators and family members are working together. The EYLF says children thrive when families and educators work together in partnership. We need to make sure that the collaboration is about curriculum, that we understand one another's expectations and attitudes, so parents understand the centre and the centre understands parents. We need to value one another's contributions to and our different roles in the child's life. Mutual trust is important. Having an ongoing open and respectful communication methods. Make sure we value one another's knowledge of the child. Build on and contribute to each other's knowledge through sharing insights and information. And we decide together about the child's experience. Knowing quite a lot about families enables us to offer a really good range of ways to get involved. And we might be able to better match our experience so that we're creating really engaging opportunities for children and we're encouraging attendance. Quality Area 6, which we haven't covered in detail yet, but we will, which talks about collaborative partnerships with families and communities, says that all service types under the National Quality Framework must provide evidence that families have had opportunities to contribute to the development and review of the services statement of philosophy and principles, policies and procedures. And the QUIP. Community involvement might include asking people like child health nurses or dietitians or nutritionists when we're updating and reviewing the healthy eating and nutrition policy, for example. There are many different ways that parents can become involved and respond to different opportunities that we provide. Epstein has done some work to try and categorise some of these types of involvement. Type 1 talks about parents becoming involved in the basic obligations of ensuring their child's health and safety. So they have child rearing skills that are helping prepare children for school readiness. They supervise them, teach them, guide them, and they create positive conditions that support learning. Type 2 can involve communication. So parents are receiving and responding to communications from the centre or school regarding the educational program and the child's progress. Type 3 speaks to volunteering. Parents are becoming more directly involved on site, and these people may be assisting teachers or administrators and children in classrooms or even other areas of the program. They might come to the school or centre to support events and attend workshops, and maybe also for their own education and training. Sometimes this is through having a parent representative, people who are on, sometimes they're present on the boards, policy making committees, parents who come and help on outings, excursions, etc. Type 4, learning at home. Parents can respond to child-initiated requests for help as well as ideas or instructions that are given from teachers. Parents monitor or assist their children at home with learning activities that are coordinated in conjunction with the school or centre. So often this is what we know of as homework, but often in early childhood this manifests in looking at stories and reading together is a common one. Type 5 is representing other parents. Parents take decision-making roles on advisory councils or other committees or groups at the program. Sometimes this might be a PNF at a district or a state level. Parents may become involved in other community activities or independent advocacy groups that monitor the program and work for educational improvement. So this is much more of a representative and advocacy role, all of which are important. Now, having spoken about all of the things that parents can do, we obviously know that there are some parents that we don't see very often that, for whatever reason, are not as active as others. And there can be a lot of barriers to their capacity to participate. Some of the common barriers that we hear a lot of the time are a lack of time. It can be also a lack of opportunity to participate. And it may even be a sense that perhaps the activities that they did participate in were maybe a bit staff directed and not characterised by a sense of partnership or mutual understanding. If you can, hit pause and maybe jot down what else could be some reasons why parents are either reluctant or unable or want to but just can't participate in things that early childhood centres or schools are actually offering. There are a variety of different reasons. So have a little think now, hit pause and jot some down. Okay, welcome back. Now look, regardless of your list, one of the most important things to keep in mind as an early childhood educator is that we need to park any judgment. The amount of time that a child spends in childcare has got nothing to do with how much a parent cares about their child. We must begin with the firm belief that all parents are interested in the development and progress of their own children. Extensive consultation with parents suggests that they don't lack interest in their child's development. The ECEC service invites partnership with parents and carers, giving consideration to the diversity and culture of the families in the service. Educators actively encourage families to become involved in the ECEC service and address any barriers to involvement. And the ECEC service provides opportunities for families to meet each other and to develop support networks. Some common fears of parents and staff were of being judged by one another, having a lack of knowledge and fear of losing one's power or responsibility, because we are both invested in the well-being and learning of children. In its worst form, this can become combative or competitive, and this is what we want to avoid at all costs. Some other challenges that can arise from parental involvement in childcare settings can include staff concerns about having the service open to scrutiny, or the lack of resources or space or time to think about and implement constructive liaison strategies, and sometimes even the lack of training given to staff about communication with parents. We need to go into relationships with parents assuming the best. And obviously, we will encounter difficult situations, but we always need to keep the forefront and the well-being of children at the centre and heart of everything that we do and everything we communicate. Some other issues that might affect parental involvement, given that it's in the best interest of the child, it's important for the setting to establish who has legal rights and responsibilities for the child in the situation that parents are separated. Occasionally, you will come across some custody issues, and these can present with different court orders and things that we need to abide by. In terms of family law, if there is no family court order, then both parents are deemed to be equally responsible for the welfare of their child. In other words, they have joint parental responsibility. If there is a family court order, then you need to comply with it. Orders create what we call an enforceable minimum. So you must do at least what the order says. You can get in trouble for aiding and abetting the contravention of an order if you allow something to happen that's in direct conflict to that order. So keeping in mind the primary duty is to the child and what's in the child's best interest, not the parents. Ongoing parental conflict after separation and divorce further increases the nature and magnitude of developmental risk for children. Often parents need to be supported to manage these risks. So we need to continue to provide a nurturing, steady presence with developmentally appropriate care arrangements that evolve at the infant's developmental pace. Co-parenting conflict is a significant predictor of ongoing distress for adolescents and adolescent antisocial behaviour. Anger and distrust, verbal conflict, poor communication and cooperation over parenting, an ongoing negative attitude to the ex-partner or ex-spouse, a lack of support for children's relationships with the other parent can all impact upon children's development. Okay, so keeping all of that in mind and knowing that we want to work in partnership with parents, what types of information should we be providing to them regularly? Some of the things we will give to them and present to them will be information about the educational program. So what are we learning about this week or this month? We will also give them information that is related to their child's assessments or evaluations, so some sort of communication about progress in certain areas. We will give them information that reflects the menu, usually on a weekly basis. What are they going to be eating this week? We will notify parents of any incidents, any injuries, if there has been any trauma or illness. We will be communicating regarding any potential excursions or even incursions. If we've got guest speakers or people coming in, we'll be communicating that. We'll also be providing opportunities for them to interact with all of our policies and procedures related to enrolment and orientation. Including families in policy development builds an understanding of our philosophy and approach, and it gives parents an insight into the centre's needs and also our insight into the parents' needs, so that policies can reflect both needs and use the service effectively. We really should have a parent committee or have a way or a process of seeking parent input and feedback on policies. And we spoke about this in a previous tutorial about how it can be really difficult to elicit responses from parents who are often very busy and maybe a bit reluctant to be engaged, or there's some other barrier preventing them from engaging on this. And some of you had some really innovative ways and ideas that you had seen or thought of to be able to incentivize that communication. Regular newsletters with a section on how the service works towards the outcomes required by the NQS. Lots of photos of what EYLF practices and NQS standards and elements look like in action can be really effective. Family surveys based on NQS criteria give families a chance to be involved in the process, and it helps develop their understanding of how the standard will impact on their service. Parent evenings, information on the NQS include how families and educators can help progress the quality improvement plan. How do we meet the goals of the QIP, and how do we look ahead to the next QIP? Once we've achieved this, what's going to come next? Share children's learning stories, photo observations through communication books or daily or weekly summaries, photos at the door of each room and service. I know there's a lot of services now that use different digital platforms to be able to connect with parents and communicate with parents really effectively and easily. We're going to whip through some examples now of how to do that. I apologize for this fuzzy photo, but this is simply showing that educators can help families feel more informed, more involved in their child's day-to-day routines by providing information about their child's experience at the ECEC service. Communicating this information on a regular basis also can build a culture of partnership between families and educators to support the children's development and well-being. So you can see this is a warm, friendly, welcoming entryway with a lot of information for parents, but also a place for them to sit and rest or to put their child's shoes on or whatever they need to do in that space before they either enter or before they leave the service. You will have seen different displays that look like this. There's a mixture of information from the government about healthy eating and good nutrition in early childhood. There's some social and emotional posters and, sort of personal responsibility lessons on the posters at the bottom. And if you look up in the top right, we can also see some diversity representation because throughout the corridor of this centre, they've got all the flags of the countries of the world. So looking at being able to welcome and inform as many different diverse families as would be participating in that service. Another welcoming display that familiarises the parents and families and children with all of the childcare workers. So actually having photographs of all the people who could potentially be working on the floor or in the office means that if a parent comes in with a child who might need to make a little bit of a connection or know who they're looking for or see a familiar face, the parent can stand with their child and say, oh, look, there's Jemima, you're going to be learning with Jemima today, and this is what she looks like. Those sorts of things are helping create that relationship and trust between educator and child. And again, a place for them to sit down, a place for them to just have a quiet conversation with their child or help calm their child before or after care. So this welcoming environment, again, we can see the multicultural flags of many of the families that are actually represented within this centre. So not of the whole world, but of the ones that are participating in this particular centre. And you can see also there's a lot of government or state government pamphlets and information sources over on the left-hand side. Lots of them would be about child development, some from the child health nurse, and others that may be good for parents to be directed to if a particular issue is presenting itself with their child. And the notice board, and you can see some rosters and menus and those sorts of things that would be updated regularly. I wanted to show you this one. It can be a little bit overwhelming at first, given the amount of colour. However, if you imagine that you were only 1.5 to 2 feet tall and you were presented with this environment, it's a very inviting way and very child-centric way of inviting children into that centre. And if you are a parent who has a child who has a very secure attachment and can sometimes struggle with drop-off, then this might be something that you might want to consider. And there's lots of different ways that centres do this really, really well. Parenting pamphlets, again, are easily accessible. This time they're at parent height, which is lovely because if you've been a parent of a toddler who loves to grab everything off the shelves, you probably don't want them to be grabbing all of the pamphlets. It's not a particularly useful resource for the child, but it is for the parent. So this centre has thought about, you know what, this is adult information. We're going to put that at height. But lots of children's work on display. My personal preference as an assistant principal in my experience is when we go into places, yes, we need to have certain amounts of government published or mandated information present or adult made display, but decor can very much be made by the children. And that can be also showcasing a lot of the curriculum outcomes that we want children to exhibit when they are with us anyway. Okay, so the next two slides are just going to give you a bit of a heads up about immunisation. There are national immunisation resources and parent information that does need to be provided. Typically, when you have a baby, the hospitals will put you in touch with the child health nurse who you need to visit or who will visit you, who will provide parents with this information. And there is obviously the immunisation register. Having some of this information available at an early childhood service is really important because some of the immunisation requirements, are related to going back and having additional vaccinations throughout early childhood to make sure that they're receiving the medicine at the correct time in their life. So it is something that can become a topic of conversation. So the more accurate and the more medically relevant information that you have available to parents, the easier that can be to understand. I'm not going to go into great detail about the Western Australian immunisation requirements simply because as these are updated, we have to stay up to date with everything. And so there are certain requirements that the state government has for babies, young children, and then teenagers and adults for our immunisation register, some of which is mandatory to be able to have an enrolment in school or in an early childhood service. So unvaccinated or unimmunised children may be denied a placement unless there are legitimate medical reasons that have excluded them from that. So for all of you as early childhood educators who might need to may be interested, but also might need to just do a little bit of due diligence, the Australian Immunisation Register is a website you can see on the top left there. The program schedule for when and what children are immunised against and how old they need to be and when they receive those particular immunisations is down the bottom on that yellow poster. And the Government of Western Australia Department of Health's immunisation requirements guidelines are available for you at those three websites above. As we come to the conclusion of this lecture, which is about establishing effective partnerships with families, it's important to consider what they are really wanting from us. Understanding and empathy for the challenges that they are facing in their lives is top of the list. They want us to have assurance that their particular family values and beliefs and customs are supported by us as early childhood educators, that we listen to parents as individual people, as adults, and that we spend time getting to know them, that we show an interest in their different perspectives, and that we build on their strengths. Educators further develop their knowledge about child development and learning and parenting practice in the context of families' cultural backgrounds, and we further develop our skills and confidence and their skills and confidence to share knowledge together. Parents want to feel welcomed. They want to feel known. They want to feel accepted and respected. We can sometimes refer to parents as they, and we want to try and avoid that if possible. They never read the notice board. They seem happy enough with the program. They think that we just play all day. This type of generalization and this type of language is something that we need to be quite mindful of. If we are using these types of generalizations, which it can be easy to do when we're talking to staff who perhaps have experiences of, sometimes tricky parents or absent parents, we need to establish that assumption that parents have their best interests at heart, even if they may not necessarily have a personality that is compatible with ours, that doesn't speak to their capacity to parent. And we have to be really mindful of that. Happy faces on staff, on children, getting that positive feel right atmosphere, not fake smiles, but genuine delight to see and welcome somebody when they enter the room. An assurance that attention is being paid to their child. No parent wants to feel that they're dropping their child off and their child's just one of the crowd and nobody's noticing their child, particularly with those children who are sort of those under the radar children. They're not particularly dominant or problematic or challenging in any way. They're just one of the crowd. We need to be mindful that we are paying attention to all children. Parents want to know that we're not just looking after their children, that we're caring for their children. They want to know that we know their child and that the child knows us. Parents want to share their educational aims clearly, and they want to encourage high levels of engagement. Early childhood workers work to build parent confidence in what they do at home and offer ideas to support and enhance what's already happening. It can be known that what parents do at home with young children has the greatest impact on how a child socialises, how they handle emotions, how they develop intellectually. The effective provision of preschool education, so the EPPE, the report concludes what parents do is more important than who parents are. ECEC services work with and support parents and carers where appropriate to access high quality resources that can support them in their parenting. So, information about development, learning, practices, and professional and community services to help them. Regular communication about their child's progress, in other words, to be involved in making decisions about their child's experience, and being able to exchange information about children regularly. Early childhood educators listen to what parents have to say about their own child's capabilities and interests, and they make use of those observations for future planning. So we incorporate children's experiences and interests in the learning provocations that we're going to be setting up. We encourage parents to be active in this planning process, and they also support children's learning at home with suggested activities and loaning materials that complement what's happening in this setting. In the end, developing effective relationships between families and educators, supporting parents and carers through the provision of information and education, and enabling the development of support networks is essential for all families. Okay, this is your final question, and this is one you must write down, and it's one that you need to bring with you to tomorrow's tutorial. All of us have experience now because we're on prac, or some of you have got lots of experience because you are also employed in early childhood education and care. Lots of carers and teachers say that working with parents is the most challenging part of the job. And I want you to think about how your perception of that role might differ from some of the families or the friends that you know. Do you have any strong beliefs about rearing children that might impact on your professional relationship with parents? Uh, One example of this is some people go into thinking that all parents provide the essential needs for their child's schooling, etc. But that's not always the case. And it can be very confronting when we experience parents who raise children in vastly different ways to us, or how we were raised, or what we would consider to be good quality parenting. So, what I would like for you to do is be as honest as you possibly can, but write down what are some things that maybe frighten you or give you cause for concern, or really you just don't want to ever encounter or deal with, or something you might have seen that relates to working with parents that is of concern to you. We'll unpack some of those together in some small groups. So, in summary, the relationships between carers and parents must be founded on commitment, trust, ethical practices, compassion, and empathy. The development of a relationship requires a commitment and willingness from both parties, and carers must take the initiative and constantly work on maintaining the relationship. We need to always remember that to keep things in perspective. So don't take yourself too seriously, and share not just difficult moments with one another, but also share the sheer joy of working with little kids. If we truly want to do a good job in our work with children, then partnerships with families is not optional. Taking time for building relationships with families is essential, because when you enroll a child, you're actually enrolling a family. Thanks everybody, you made it to the end. I'll see you in tutorials.